My name is Hjelm. Currently, I'm a director of information security for a healthcare startup. But in the past, I've worked in consulting. I've done a lot of IR engagements. I used to be at the point with business email compromise where I do two of these things a week. So once you've done one, you probably they're very repetitive. But so for the purposes of kind of note taking and I don't mind if you take pictures here, but there's actually a short link I put up there. I didn't want to do a QR code because people get kind of squeamish with QR codes. What they call now quishing. Do people use that term quishing unironically? I don't know. But in any event, so helm.is/mail fraud. I've got slides and notes for everything there on there. So like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about business email compromise. Business email compromise is when an account is taken over and then financial crimes are committed, or there's other, you can do other aspects of it, like stealing information, using that access to gain access to other systems by way of sending an email as a trusted partner or a vendor to another party. But to be honest, with business email compromise, it really doesn't get a whole lot of attention. I had a picture of the guy Bruno from Encanto. I don't know if you're familiar with that movie. We don't talk about the EC just like they don't talk about Bruno. And the reason is kind of, in my opinion, threefold. So number one, ransomware gets the news. DDoS attacks get the news. And the reason why ransomware gets the news is because it's a very visceral crime. It's got very real world impact. If you get hit with ransomware, your company's down for a week or 2 weeks until you can restore from backups or pay some guy from some unnamed country who we won't call Russia a lot of money to get your data back, right? So ransomware is a very visceral crime. I mean, just like, what was it, the Colonial Pipeline, when that got hit with ransomware, the company itself, apparently, the pipeline itself did not get affected by the ransomware, but it was because the accounting systems couldn't count how much oil and petroleum were going through the pipeline. As a result, everybody was filling trash bags with gasoline, whatever, right? But again, there's very real-world effects to ransomware. But comparatively, business email compromise, it's just money. I mean, we don't want to, if you get scammed out of a couple $100,000, you don't want to publicize it, and it's really not going to affect many people outside of, the finance department for the most part for a lot of companies. Although, I'll get to it in a second, it can be a very costly crime. And thirdly, in the information security space, we like to talk about what's sexy and what's hot and what's cool in terms of exploits and DLL hijacking, this, that, everything. Business email compromise is, by comparison, it's a very low-tech and low-complexity crime that does some social engineering, but really doesn't even need that much social engineering, and it's got a low barrier to entry. It's just, not very cybersecurity cool. It's not really like the hooded guy sitting in the dark room being super sneaky and stuff like that. It's just stealing money. So it doesn't get the same sort of headlines because of these factors. That being said, just the numbers here, and I apologize that you can't really see the words and stuff like that, but business email compromise is the most, well, it used to be the most costly computer crime. These are according to the FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center, IC3. That number is actually 2022 at the top. I forgot to change the title there. Sorry, but up until this year, business email compromise was the cybercrime that had the highest reported total losses to the FBI. It was actually surpassed this year by investment scams, cryptocurrency. Primarily cryptocurrency was the scam that drove that over the top there. But nevertheless, so you're looking at the numbers there. So way down by the bottom, almost a rounding error, the blue line. Is the second line up to the bottom. That's ransomware. That's about $40 million, whereas business email compromise is between the TVs there, and it's about $2.7 billion. So that's the reported numbers for business email compromise if you're comparing the two. And then investment fraud and cryptocurrency went over $3 billion in reported losses last year. That being said, the averages are still off the charts. The average business email compromise was about $125,000 per incident that was reported to the FBI. So it's serious money that's being lost in all these things. and you know, there's some, you know, like I said, there's not a whole lot of news articles about it because a lot of companies don't want to say the news that we got our money stolen from us, right? But you look at some of these are some public information from some municipalities and states, and so like Portland, Oregon, for instance, they've had 2 big ones in the past 5 years. This $1.4 million one, this $1.4 million was meant to go to this $1.4 million was meant to go to housing construction for lower cost housing, and somebody got in the email system of Portland, Oregon, and then as a result, they lost, you know, $1.4 million. And you know, these, you know, I mentioned earlier that ransomware has a very visceral effect to companies and stuff like that, but the loss of money can, in fact, have real world impacts to real people, where you see schools and cities and other organizations losing quite a bit of money there. So how does business email compromise happen? Well, there's really going to be, you know, 4 ways that a bad guy can get access to email. And we're going to talk through some of those. We're going to do a little demo hopefully later. But the 4 main ways that I kind of classify it is credential theft, session theft, which is also can be facilitated by malware, and then the 4th thing would be application consent grabs. And we'll talk about these a little bit. So credential theft, you know, credential stuffing, where you're stealing credentials and you're logging into systems with stolen usernames and passwords, the dark web, and like there's also out there like with ransomware and other services. You know, there's actually a whole crime ecosystem now, a whole crime business ecosystem that can you've got initial access brokers who will steal the usernames and passwords and sell those, and then they will then you can buy those on the dark web, and then you'll be able to use those to get into whatever systems and services those would have access to. And you know, there's a lot of really novel attacks that you can do for against organizations to gain access to session tokens and malware. But most, if not, like I would say probably 80 to 90% of the business email compromises that I've worked have been simple username and password getting into email. And so, and then also too, there's also different ways to talk about authentication and weak access control. Like for instance, with Office 365, well, they since have disabled it, but it used to be that with older email protocols like IMAP or POP3, those would use what's called basic authentication, and they would not enforce multi-factor. So as soon as you had a username and password, you could use Thunderbird to pop into somebody's Office 365 account. You could download all their email, and you wouldn't be prompted for MFA, even if they had MFA on. Since then, Microsoft has supposedly made it so that they turned off basic authentication by default, but I've had mixed experience that out in the wild. So the next thing that we talk about would be session theft. And I don't know if you're familiar with this guy in the back there, but his name is Linus. He's got a YouTube channel. And there was a really poignant video that he posted about a week ago where there was a phishing attack against his organization, and that phishing attack led to somebody getting a session token, and that session token was then used to access their Gmail account and their Google account and start deleting videos out. So there's a lot of different ways to do session theft. It's called machine in the middle now. They used to call it man in the middle, which kind of makes no sense because it's a computer. Computers are not men, so machine in the middle attack is what they call it now. You can also call it cookie token theft. You can steal it out of different applications. I've also seen malware and malicious payloads being used to steal sessions. So this tool in particular, EvilJinx, it's a malicious proxy. There's a bunch of different tools like this out there. EvilJinx is it's an open source and easy to use. I mean, if I'm able to like type in a couple things and change a couple settings on a Go application like EvilJinx, it's pretty simple to use. But you know, like I mentioned earlier, there's a whole so like there's a lot of companies nowadays that are doing like SaaS apps, right? Software as a service. Well, there's also phishing as a service vendors, and they've got different services called like Evil Proxy and caffeine, where on the dark web, they will sell you access to phishing kits that are maintained and managed by more or less a criminal cloud service. So these malicious proxies are what a lot of times are being used to inline steal session tokens and cookies. But then there's also not just session stealing in the browser, but there's also malware. There's a couple different variants that you can use to steal session tokens out of the browser. But side note, does anybody know what that logo is on the screen there? Anybody? That's called Electron. Electron is an application framework that you use to build applications that interact with the web. Think you can build a fat client on your computer that then accesses a website. And unlike, say, Google Chrome, Chromium browsers, Electron apps are not very well hardened at all. And so, does anybody know of any Electron apps off the top of their head? Yeah, Slack, Teams, Discord. All these applications are Electron apps, and just like you can steal tokens out of the browser, you can also steal tokens out of Slack, out of Teams, out of Discord, any number of these Electron apps on your desktop, you can steal tokens out of those too. And how would they get this malware on there? Well, for instance, with the Linux Tech Tips, somebody used a simple phishing campaign with a malicious payload, a malicious PDF that was then open to get on there. But then there's also too, like ad poisoning in Google and other search engines that nobody uses, I don't think. But in Google specifically, you can buy ads and you can put your malware at the top. I've worked a couple of instances where you'd have like a Redline Stealer and somebody would download a cracked version of a software. Well, they got the cracked software, but they also got smoke loader on their computer, and then you can go through and you can actually see where they staged all where the tool automatically staged all the session tokens out of those browsers and then uploaded them to usually Discord, if not Telegram. So there's all sorts of examples out there. People also call these all the time too banking Trojans, but that's a misnomer. They're not just for banking anymore. They're for session stealing. They're for persistent access. They use them to resell to other folks so that they can then do ransomware. There's a whole bunch of different types of malware that are used to steal access, but that's kind of the gist of malware attacks and session tokens and business email compromise. And then the last way that I would see business email compromise happening would be what's called application consent grants. So on the internet now, everything's like an application. Like, so for instance, if you log in on your phone using the default Mail app on iOS or Android, what actually happens if you're like logging into Office 365, it actually creates an application consent grant in Office 365 for iOS accounts. And so because the application on the phone is acting on your behalf within the organization, within Office 365. So with everything acting as an application, you've got application connection protocols like OAuth that allow for consent grants between them to allow one application to act on your behalf. And as we can see here with this fake app here, you're giving this application permissions to act on your behalf in Office 365 to read and write files, read your calendar, sign you in, read your profile, and these can be masked in various ways. They can make them look like a real application. And so it would kind of go through the same process of a phishing email coming in, and then once the phishing email comes in, then you would click on this application and it would say, hey, can I access your Office 365 or Google application or Slack or whatever else? Can I access that on your behalf? And sometimes with these application consent grants, they become extremely persistent. So for instance, if you suspect that a user's account is compromised that has a malicious application installed, and you just reset their password and force them to sign out, that act of changing their password and forcing them to sign out does not actually remove the application consent in a lot of cases, in which case they're still going to be in there and you're still going to have a problem. So when a business email compromise happens, and I apologize, I didn't realize that these were so small, and also the box as well, sorry. But so when a business email compromise happens, bad guys, they're going to do a number of different things to steal information and then maintain persistence. So for instance, mailbox rules. if they are in your mailbox and they're trying to facilitate payment fraud by changing invoices or changing payment instructions, they're going to create mailbox rules to hide the original emails and then to manipulate who can see the emails. They might put it in a hidden folder, they might delete it, they might also forward emails, so they might gain access to a compromised account, and they might start forwarding individual emails, again, using mailbox rules to forward from your address to an external address that they control. Then as they're in the account, they might use that access to start searching for sensitive data. So W-2 information, social security numbers, invoices, all sorts of sensitive information that they can then dump out and monetize. And another thing that they might do is payment redirection. So again, if they have access to invoices, they might try to change some of these invoices and make them so instead of going to Wells Fargo Bank, they're going to Bank of America, or they might send it to some other country, or they'll change wire instructions if they can. Another thing that they could do is downloading the entire mailbox. As I mentioned earlier with, for instance, older versions of Office 365 that did not block basic authentication, if they had access, if they wanted to, they could just use an IMAP account and log into your Office 365 with Thunderbird or some similar mail app and download a copy of your whole mailbox. And then they could use that for pretext phishing against some of your business partners and other things like that. And then a big one is account impersonation and delegation abuse. So what happens in this case, and this is like the messiest types of business email compromise, is say for instance you have an administrator and the administrator account gets compromised, then they're going to go through they're going to try to maybe get into your exchange servers or your exchange admin center, and they're going to start delegating permissions to other people's accounts. That's where it gets fun and that's what gets interesting, because they could be having conversations with themselves in the mailboxes, and then they've got a whole paper trail inside your email system saying that Joe approved a transaction and Cheryl was made aware of it. Well, it was all their emails, but it's all kind of hidden from other people because they're using mailbox rules to hide all their transactions. And as a result, people are none the wiser because it all looks like it's coming from inside the organization. The calls are coming from inside the house, if you watched Chris Merkel's talk yesterday about authentication proxies. And another thing that they might do too to keep persistence is add additional MFA methods. So, for instance, in like Okta breach and other breaches, they would add additional factors of multi-factor because if they have the password but they don't have the MFA method, they might want to come back later. So they might want to use their MFA, they might want to use their Google Authenticator instead of your Google Authenticator. So what better way to do that than by adding MFA? So that's the initial part of here. Let's try to do a demo here real quick. So yeah, so this is our user. His name's Alex. He works for a company called The Business Group, and he's got an invoice here. This is a legitimate invoice, and he's also got an email chain with an accounting person named Joni here, and but he's got this phishing email here that's just recently come in from another vendor called Cooking Computers, and I'm going to see if this will work here. Unfortunately, I was having some troubles with my phishing earlier, but hopefully this will work. But so this right here is actually going through our EvilJinx server that we talk about here. So as you can see up at the top, we've got login microsoftonline.plasmafund.co, and so it's going to redirect us here. So Alex, he saw this email come in, and they said, oh, well, we've got new pricing information on our SharePoint site. Why don't you go ahead and check it out? So Alex is going to log into our SharePoint site. And then he's going to, enter the password. And the business group, they're super secure. They've got MFA enabled, so they're like really secure right now. So let's log in with our MFA token here. Gotta wait here for reset. Okay. and then he's logged in here. And like I mentioned, Alex got this email from a vendor, and he thinks where there's going to be some payment information or new updates. That's weird. There's nothing here. He just logged into Office. That's whatever. Alex is done for a bit. He's gonna go get some coffee. So, but in the meantime, we're gonna go take a look here. And here's our attacker computer, and this is the console output from Evil Jakes. So let's look at our sessions output. So as we can see here, we got a new visitor coming in, and they landed. We've even got our password here. So we got what are sessions? So our sessions right now, just to scroll up. So as I mentioned, this is Evil Jakes. This is running here on this server, and sessions. Here's session 26. And as you can see on the screen here, this is the full authentication token that you would use to log into Office 365. And well, what can we do with that? That's a great question. I mean, like I said, we've got Alex's username, his password, his user agent. So let's just check this out. So let's take a look at our token here. And this, again, this is our attacker computer. This is not Alex's computer. Let's go to so we're going to Office here. We're going to have our attacker log into Office, and he's going to be logging in with Alex here. But we want to use his token because we want to act like Alex. So let's go ahead and delete all of our cookies here. Our Sesame Street monster, Cookie Monster, would be absolutely furious right now because we just deleted a whole bunch of cookies. But we can import new ones. That's okay. We imported our cookie that we stole out in the proxy. We refresh the page, and we're now Alex. We are on a completely different system, and we are now Alex. So let's go see, as our attacker, what Alex has in his mailbox. So again, this is tabula rasa here. As the attacker, we don't know. We saw previously on Alex's screen that he's got these conversations here. So our attacker, he's logged in, and he sees, oh, well, there's a conversation with Joni here, and it says, hey, Joni, and it's out of order here, but hey, Joni, I've got some invoices. This is actually Alex talking to Joni here, and she says, hey, Joni, I have a few questions about some invoices. Should I just send them to you? And she says, yeah, sure, no problem, I can help him get those paid. So he's got kind of the internal structure of how payments work our attacker now has instructions and information about how internal payment structures work inside the business group here. And so then we see that Alex has this morning received an invoice from a vendor called Plasma, fake company here. So, and for the sake of brevity here, I see here that we've got the invoice, and I already downloaded I simulated downloading here. So we've got the real, so here's our real invoice here. And as you can see, we've got Plaza Fund to Alex Wilbur at the business group. Quite a bit of money here, right? $240,000. And we've got wire instructions for the business group to wire money to the Plaza Fund at Wells Fargo Bank here. So we've got Wells Fargo Bank number here, and our attacker, he's going to just go ahead and change this invoice. And so instead of going to Wells Fargo Bank, now we're going to go ahead and go to Bank of America to an account that I control, because I want $240,000 that the business group is going to send me here. So let's go ahead, and we're going to, first of all, we're going to check our other email here, and we're going to copy out what they send here, and then we're going to create a rule here, because we don't want Alex to there. So we're going to create a rule because we don't want Alex to see this email. So we're just gonna say send all the emails from accounting at Plaza Fund to the archive folder, because we don't want Alex to see this email here. And then email's gone. And then in our private email here, we're gonna send a new email to Alex. corrected invoice in here because we want the money, right? So I'm just gonna go there, and then we go back over to our other, while it's waiting here, some junk. Huh, that's weird. That's okay. We don't think this is junk because it's from us, the attacker. We trust this email. It's okay. It's not junk. So now we got our new invoice here, and again, because we know what our payment instructions are for the organization here, we can reply back to Joni and say. Obviously, you probably want to be have a little less brevity and a little more politeness, but invoice has made it. And then, let's see here. I got Joni, she's got an email here. So our attacker is just going to be receiving $240,000 in their Bank of America account. So and that's business email compromise in a nutshell. That happens for $2.7 billion per year. Tens of thousands of those incidents happen every year. It's a big deal, and it's like I said, it's very, very simple how that happens. So we talked a little bit about what the problem is. We talked about showing you how it works. How do you protect against it? Well, normally with information security stuff, I don't like to say training is the answer because a lot of these things could be figured out with technical solutions. In fact, side note, I was really nervous today because Microsoft burned my domain, but I could switch to Chrome, worked just fine. So a little pro tip there, Microsoft will try to burn your domains if they're using the incorrect domain. So nevertheless, one of the big things that folks need to start talking about in cybersecurity is how payment transactions are happening. How are we maintaining, or how do, in particular, dual authorization for changes to financial transactions. If you're not asking about it, your cyber insurance carriers will be asking about it. I guarantee you. Also, talk about user awareness training. Again, I don't like to beat that horse, but what you can do is you can teach users how do you look in different platforms like Google Workspace, Microsoft 365. You can look for your sign-in history, and you can see like, oh well, this IP address or this location is not where I'm supposed to be. That's kind of weird. Maybe I should take a look at that. Talk to cybersecurity. And also learn what suspicious URLs look like. Again, that's kind of a mixed bag because, for instance, looking at like a Microsoft 365 login URL, that thing is long and confusing. I don't like them, but like in this case here, it was going to like login.microsoft.plasmafund.co, whereas the real URL is login.microsoftonline.com. So making sure the users are kind of familiar with what they should be logging into is important. Also, tabletop exercises. Having your organization go through routine tabletop exercises as to how you would handle a business email compromise event is eye-opening for a lot of folks. And then also incident response planning, making sure that you have knowledge of how to contact the FBI, so that way then you can get a Secret Service report. The faster you can get a report in, then the more likely that you can claw the money back in these cases. I've seen cases where the Secret Service was able to successfully claw back hundreds of thousands of dollars that were stolen through these types of transactions. So making sure that your incident response plan includes how to contact the FBI and get a report in can save you a lot of money if you're to lose it this way. There's tons of technical controls that you can talk about here. I've got like 2 or 3 slides, but at the top there's phish-resistant MFA, YubiKeys, things like that. In this case, I mean, as I mentioned, I was using like a Google Authenticator here for the business group. OTPs, they're not very phish-resistant because you can type those into any website. Whereas if you're using like a YubiKey, if you were to go to plasmafund.co, which is our phishing site, a YubiKey would not recognize that and say, I'm not going to log you into there. So that would prevent you from losing your session token that way. And then, implementing application consent grant workflows. So making so that your administrators are blocking new applications from being installed in Office 365, in Google Workspace, in Slack, wherever. Making sure that you can block those new applications can also prevent applications from stealing your emails. There's attachment filtering. I mean, let's be frank here. Like, if you should be just blocking zip files. Like, there's a group called Iced ID out there. They always come in with encrypted zip files, and there's no reason why you should have legitimate zip files coming into your organization. Spam filtering. Again, making sure that SPF, DKIM, and DMARC are properly configured for your organization, and then starting to block some of those messages that don't pass those tests can help you to mitigate and get rid of a lot of the low-hanging fruit when it comes to phishing emails. Additional technical controls, conditional access, making it so that in order to log into an account, you've got tools out there that will say if this is coming from an untrusted device or an untrusted location, don't allow it in the account. That can help if the session token is stolen. Monitor for mail rule changes. Start creating alerts in your systems, whether it's Office 365, your Sims, Sentinel, Splunk, what have you. Start creating alerts for if there's people that are changing mailbox rules. It could be noisy, but at the same time, a lot of these mailbox rules that get put out there are very noticeable when it happens. It basically, a lot of times, most of the malicious mailbox rules that I saw would be like a string of random characters, or maybe just like AAA, and then it would say if it has invoice, then put it in a folder. Well, those sorts of things should flag an alert. And also monitoring for suspicious logins and activity. It's kind of difficult depending on where folks are these days with that sort of maturity, but that's another thing to look at too. And then the last thing I would say about like technical controls in email systems would be segmenting your admin accounts. Like I mentioned earlier, the messiest business email compromise I've had to deal with are when the bad guys got a hold of an admin account, because then they could like basically make themselves into whoever within the organization and have conversations with themselves. Untangling that is a mess, but the best way to handle that is to segment your admin accounts so that way then your high privilege admin accounts don't even really have an email address that's addressable from the outside world. And then using that, using a daily driver account that does not have privilege access for daily driver activities like checking email and going on websites and stuff. On the endpoint, EDR, DNS filtering, and then disabling opening dangerous file types by double clicks. Microsoft Windows has this weird thing where you can double click a JS file and then it opens. I don't know why you want to do that on Windows. Like, not everybody's running Node.js or anything like that, so it makes no sense why that's a default. So a best practice there would be to disable opening dangerous file types like ISOs, VHDs, JS files, VBS files, disabling those where you can to prevent those from being used. And then, if you're a consultant or other sorts of cybersecurity folks, again, like I mentioned earlier, start talking to your finance folks about what sort of payment processes you have in place, because the better you can understand how they do payments, the better you can help them secure those processes so that your organization is not losing money. If you're on a red team, are you searching for payment-related information in emails to kind of like put yourself out there and say, I'm looking for invoices? Are you creating any new mailbox rules? Can you get them to see that you're trying to create new mailbox rules that could then flag on and be indicative of BEC activity? Are you attempting to add MFA tokens and factors like new OTP devices and things like that? These are the kinds of things that BEC actors are doing, and if you can start causing alerts as a red teamer, that can help your blue team be prepared. So yeah, that's pretty much all I've got. Again, I got the short link there, hjelm.is/mailfraud. I'll probably also put it on LinkedIn too. If you want to, find me on LinkedIn, I'll probably put it there too. But thanks everybody. Does anybody have any questions or comments here? Yeah.
So how can you help protect your customers from being deceived? That you're sending invoices and making sure that they're paying you and not an adversary?
That's a great question. So the question was, how can you prevent customers from committing invoice fraud and changing invoices? Well, there's a lot of good tools out there. Kind of the soft tool would be, again, kind of, just having out-of-band communications with your customers and saying, are you sure that you want to make this change to invoices? And, call them back using known phone numbers, known email addresses. Not using, maybe not using the phone number that was in the email that they just sent you, but if you have historical contact information, calling those sorts of numbers, calling the main office number for the organization. Those are some ways to do it. I've also found that some online platforms like Bill.com, those are pretty good. Not to hawk a particular vendor or whatever, but I found that when I was working with customers that use Bill.com, they had some really robust kind of know your customer and know your invoice management tools that help them to really kind of identify any changes that might be naughty. So, yeah.
Talk a little bit about incident response. How do you know?
Well, that's a good question. So the question is, how do you do incident response, and how do you know when to respond to a business email compromise? And yeah, the first thing would be that if you notice that money is not going where it's supposed to be, or you're getting complaints from vendors or customers that money is not going where it's supposed to be, definitely that's one way to kind of, when everyth's kind of out there, but then also to respond to it, there's a couple of different things you can look at. I mentioned a couple times during the talk cyber insurance. Cyber insurance is a big helper in that regard, because they can help connect you with external forensic firm if you don't have one, if a lot of small businesses. But even if you're trying to proactively understand, before the horse leaves the barn, before the horse bolts the barn, you can look for any sorts of financial changes, or work with your finance team to understand, how do they know when there's financial changes? How do they keep track of invoices? Those sorts of things. All right. Well, thanks everybody. I'll stick around for a few minutes to answer any sidebar questions.